So we have our 12-bolt Chevy rear end. We have our 65 Impala. We are going to put them together, make them one. Peanut butter and jelly time.
I ordered a BLT though.
It's peanut butter and jelly time. We don't care about our BLTs. Johnny Rockets doesn't serve BLTs anymore.
Why?
So we will be adding some coilovers, a couple brackets that need to be put on the housing. I think before I put the rear end in there, it'd be easier. Drill a couple holes. We'll get the brackets on it. We're gonna be adding the upper arm like I talked about. So we're gonna have, it's gonna be a factory 4-link and they're adjustable. Uppers are adjustable. So we can set preload, pinion angle. Let's get it out, get these brackets on here. Just about got the 12-bolt finished up. We got it all installed. Got the coilovers adjusted. Everything's torqued. Pinion angle, everything's set for a good baseline. I'm gonna double check it once the tranny's in it and everything, but pinion angle should be good. Still need to do the rear sway bar I'm working on. I got the mounts here for the rear sway bar and the parking brake cables. We don't have any cables right now, so once we get everything else taken care of, then I'll worry about the parking brake. So that's where we're at on the rear end. So now we're gonna move to the front and get it finished up. All right, so now hopefully now.
Stop it. Get some help.
We're able to put the front end together. So if you remember, we had to stop last time because we didn't have the little sleeve here. We had the T-bar in the lower coilover. So now we got the right bushing in here for the lower control arm. We can keep moving ahead. We can get it together here, hopefully. And I'm gonna be changing, I just wanna show you this really quick before I get started. I'm gonna be changing these inner and outer tie rods, but check this out. I didn't touch these things. This is the way this car came in here. Look at this. Look at this. I didn't loosen them. Look at. I didn't even touch them. Isn't that unreal? Just a little tidbit. Let me get this off here real quick. I'll show you. Going to the solid guy here, the QA1 deal, and it's got the lock nuts on both sides of it. But this is the original deal. And just so you know, if you ever do this on your own car, see this little slit right here? This slit right here needs to line up with this slit. It will never crimp it down if you don't line it up in that spot. You put it over here and tighten it, it's a solid spot in the adjuster sleeve here, and it's not gonna tighten it up, obviously. You can see, it doesn't do anything. These bolts are tight. This slit needs to line up with this slit before you tighten it. That's the only way it's gonna keep this from being loose. So this thing has a auto adjustment going down the road. This thing's bouncing around and your toes going all over the place. It's a little tidbit. We're not using that junk. Probably had a little bit to do with why his tires were wearing. I mean, they were wearing on the edge, so it was more toe and everything else, or not toe, camber, but the toe's definitely not going to help it. It's going to make it come in and plow, one way or another. But we're going to be changing this. We got to get the inner tie rod, so we're not going to be able to do that right now. This is kind of goofy looking because it has a torsion little arm. It mounts up to the frame a little bit of an angle, so this is actually lines up. That goes for that. Just takes place with the torsion rod. You look at it at first glance, like, wait, they gave me the wrong one, but it's actually right. So it has this stud here. And all this stuff's so dirty, it's been sitting there for so long. So we got a stud that goes in the end of it. This is our lower control arm bag of tricks right here. So first you gotta get this set up in the control arm. So I'm gonna put a little bit of lube on it. We gotta put Loctite where it goes into the control arm, but we want NICs where the nuts are, so when you gotta do something with them. So we're gonna screw this in here, and it wants to have 5.5 inches of thread hanging out from the control arm here. Call that 5.5. I need to get a wrench. Okay. So after we get that tightened down, you gotta have a half an inch in between nuts. It's like a baseline. Then we got our ginormous washer. Then we have our bushing with our sleeve. The sleeve can go on either side of the bushing. Before we stick it through the frame, we got these two sleeves. So we have a sleeve that goes into here. Then we have these two ends. This will go on this end. You don't have to worry about lubing it because it has a Zerk on it. After you get it together, you can lube it. We got our ginormous bolt here for our adjustment. I'm gonna put a little bit of anti-seize on this bolt just so it doesn't get rusted up in this sleeve because that doesn't get lubed. This is the exciting part. You gotta crawl all up in here. You gotta come. And once you get it close, you can get the coil over to hold your control arm, hopefully. Oh, the inside's trying to fall apart. Get something to hold something. I gotta get the bolt in first. So we got the lower bolt in there. Our lower bolt's a real pain in the butt, to say the least. You gotta line the cam up on this side and then the cam up on this side. And so now I got my radius arm in the frame. So now I gotta put the other side on it. And even though it has a polylock nut, I am going to put some more anti-seize on the threads. And a little tidbit that the sleeve, you gotta make sure that this step, it locates in the frame and that the sleeve goes through and everything. So gotta take some time, line it all up. So here's our torsion, here's our stud sticking through. We're gonna put our bushing on here, our ginormous washer, and our ginormous nut. And hopefully we'll get it started. These are semi-ginormous socket. This is all gonna have to be adjusted when I get it aligned. So I don't wanna crank on it like super tight, but I just wanna get it snug down so we're able to move the car without the whole thing feeling like it's gonna fall apart. I'm gonna tighten up my bolt here on my coilover. I'll torque down.
Easy. Now you try.
This is the CPP drop spindle. This is a 2-inch drop spindle, so we're definitely gonna have no problem getting this thing low to the ground with the adjustable coilovers and the drop spindle. This is a little hardware bag for the upper control arm. Look at that. Not sure why it comes with so many washers. It's like that little joke. You always have leftover parts.
Witty enough to take it apart, smart enough to hide the extra parts.
Yeah, so I'm gonna come over here so I can tighten this thing up here and line it up with the little notch for the cotter pin. The cotter pin in the top. I'm gonna grab a pair of dikes. I don't like the cotter pins hanging off really far like that to catch your arm and stuff. About like so. A little better, I think. Look at that, huh? What are we gonna do now? Now we have our bracket for our ginormous Willwood brakes. So we're doing 65 on the lower bolt here. And then the big boys, we're going 120. Where are we at here? 120. See that? 120. That's 120. Okay. 120. Eek. Oh, there it is. A good click. Yeah. So I had a little mishap with my steering bracket here. You have to grind this down to fit the spindle. So then the bolts that came with it, after you grind it down and you put in here, are really long. So I was trying to cut them down. So when I tightened it, the bolt was barely sticking through the nut. Well, the other one I got a little excited on. My eyeball upper was off, and I cut it too short.
Here lies the master mechanic spindle bolt. What a baby.
So I had to order another bolt kit in order to finish this up. Looks like I gotta grind it a little bit more anyways, but I can't put it on yet. It's the moral of the story. But we're gonna finish up the brakes. So we're gonna put the hub on here, and I'm hoping I can sneak the bolts in it after I have the hub on it. If not, then I'm gonna take the hub back apart. So we got our hub here. I already packed the bearings. I already put the seal in it. See, it's all packed. And I already got the inner bearing in here, or I mean the outer bearing in here. See, it's already all greased. Look at that. So I'm gonna make sure this is cleaned up here, wiped down, and we're gonna put our hub on. So now that I got this on here, let's see if I can sneak this bolt in here. This is a longer one, so this one's more, oh yeah. Shoot, ain't no problem at all.
That was easy.
Look at that. Got our rotor here. If you remember, we already safety wired it. And these guys here has 3 bolts that hold it to the hub here. So sometimes it's got dual bolt patterns. So you got to rotate it around to line up everything. Did you get them all? Nope. It's not that one. Is that one? 1, 2. This one. Oh, 1, 2. There it is.
much added safety does that create bolting it to the hub?
There's no safety in this. Only reason for doing this is that it holds the rotor in place. It locates it so it's actually centered on the hub and that it's tight to the rotor. So when you go to put the wheel on there, then nothing cocks or gets it all bound up. So when you torque the wheel down, everything's tight. I wouldn't say it adds any safety or anything different. It just holds it centered on there. So we got an adapter bracket, I guess you could say. So this caliper bracket goes to the other caliper bracket. Bolt down our caliper bracket to our caliper bracket. This comes with shims. You can shim this bracket over, which is going to move your caliper over. Then it has shims that goes below it here to bring it up and down. So now we have our bracket to our bracket tight. We're going to put on our caliper and see how it looks in the rotor here. And it looks pretty stinking centered. So now I'm going to put my nuts on here and washers, and we're going to see how our height is. Then we have our brake pads. Slide in here. We got the pad all the way to the top. I don't think that needs to be shimmed. I think it's amazing. And then we have our little bracket here. Just holds down the pads in here. So we'll put that in there. And you can see that Willwood, they want their rotors to go one way. So you got a little arrow. So we got the rotor going the right way. And then on the caliper, they get kind of tricky. They have an arrow in the 6 piston. See it right there? That points up. See how it goes through the 6 piston and the arrow pointing that way? So we got there's a left and a right caliper. Because there's 6 pistons in here, but there's 2 of them are smaller or something. So they want them in a certain location. I already started the brake lines. So I have the adapter up here. So we have our 90 degree and our flex brake line. This is a Willwood. This is the DOT approved. Good street brake line. This is good stuff. Don't want to be blowing a line. Make sure there's no dirt in there.
You just blew a line.
And you kind of want the lines to go to their natural arch. So you can see it's already bending that way. So we're gonna have it bend that way towards the caliper. Gonna kind of do a little loopy-loop. I'm gonna have the 90 to the top. I'm gonna put a little bit of Teflon paste on here before I put it in. So we got it on there. We got it tightened up. Like I said, I already started my brake lines. So we got the hard line here, all tight. I just got to double check. I got to torque my brackets here. I got to see what the torque spec is on my caliper.
Is this the most reading you do?
Yeah, this is the most instructions that I look at is right here just to see what they want their bolts torqued to. So I got it all torqued down, so this is done. We got to wait on the bolts like I talked about, the one that I cut, so I can't put the steering on yet. So we're going to go to the master cylinder and we're going to show you the firewall. We welded up some holes. It looks really good. So let's check that out. I welded up the hole here where the old booster was, and there's a hole over here for the speedo cable, and then there's another one down here that was, I think, for the pedal mechanism, the rod for if it was the manual. Yeah, they were a manual, but I'm pretty sure it was the manual rod for the pedal was down over here. So I filled up 3 holes. I put welded it in, filled pieces of metal, cleaned them up. Turned out really, really trick. And then I sanded down the firewall. I had some overspray where the other people tried to detail the engine, with a rattle cannon inside the engine bay.
It's me, Mickey Mouse.
This thing I tried to move. It's like a vacuum reservoir for all the doors and everything for the factory stuff. But when you see it all together, it actually goes okay. It's okay. This is for the vacuum lines and stuff, but I'm going to incorporate any wiring that needs to go to the inside. I kind of stopped halfway. I filled one of the holes over here. This is the other one where it had the ground straps that went to the valve covers on the original conventional small blocks. I welded the hole up over here, and there's a couple holes up here I cleaned up, but it gets to a point where you just got to stop. This wasn't on the RO. This wasn't part of the gig. I was getting a little carried away, so you got to draw a line in the sand at some point. But then the wiring's still hanging down here because the whole car is going to he got a whole complete wiring system for it, so the whole car is going to be rewired. The engine's been in and out of here a couple times, kind of just adjusting it and see what everything fits right. And initially we had a little more forward and the manifold was kind of close to the gearbox, so we kind of gave it a little massage, I guess you could say, kind of is grounded a little bit at an angle. And then I put it back in and I didn't like it. I guess I can't say that I didn't like it. It just looked better back. So I decided I moved it back as far possible as I could on the adapters on the engine. They're adjustable, so I put them all the way forward. So I moved the engine back as far as possible. And when I did that, I actually got more room on the steering box, so this wasn't really necessary. after the fact, because once by moving the engine back, the manifolds, the angle of them, where they come down is past this point. And then we gave a little massage over here, kind of like on the passenger side. They do the little divot there for the mechanical fuel pump. I just heated it up with a torch to make it easier so you don't have to get, crazy beating on it. And then, once you get it glowing, you just give it some pounds with a hammer and it moves pretty easy. Looks like it's factory deal. But yeah, so we got the alternator all set up. We got our new brake lines. All the complete system brake lines are brand new. So we got the one running over, and then we have a proportioning valve here. We're gonna put our booster on here in a second. So each front is separate, and then we got the rear line. And then of course, I like to do the loopy loops, just like the factory would do it. Because of the flex, we got our rubber body mounts, and then the booster's mounted on the firewall, so the frame's gonna flex and move, and then the body doesn't. So that's why you need to have some sort of give. I mean, if this thing was all rigid and solid, then you wouldn't have to worry about that.
So if something is solid mounted, you don't need to do that?
Not really, no. I mean, it wouldn't hurt, but like on the Camaro over there, when we do that, that's all solid bushing and everything. So I'm not gonna worry about doing a loop to it, because there's in theory, there's no flex, because now the body and the frame is more one. So you don't have that rubber in there as a cushion to get more movement. Now this is a full frame car, but you still get a lot of movement. Like if you jack this thing up, and then you put the jack stands behind the pillar here, at the door jamb, and then you lower the jack down, you'll see the flex. You'll see how the fenders will come apart from the body as the frame comes down, especially with the engine in there, how it'll sag and move. So there's movement even in a full frame car. This thing's not set up to be a rigid, stiff deal, so that's why it has the flex in there. It's gonna have movement. If you have it stiff, then it's just tugging on your master and pulling it down, and you can break a brake line. And we talked about enough about what happens when you break a brake line. Let me grab the booster. Let me grab the master. Check this thing out. This is the setup here. We got our nice chrome little small booster. We got our Wilwood master cylinder. We got our Wilwood proportioning valve.
Look how cute that is.
Isn't it adorable? So you can see that this moves upward. So the other one was mounted down here. That's why this hole was bigger. And then this aftermarket one, they move it up, and then it just uses the top part. They call it a keyhole. If you look at the picture of it originally, it almost looks like an old school, like a key hole in there. So that's why we took the bottom up, and then we move it up so we can mount this guy. So two of them are studs, and then these are gonna be bolts going in, and then I'm gonna put a bolt in the bottom ones here, because on the inside there's actually the pedal bracket that bolts to all this, so it just needs to be stiff held to the firewall. So I'm gonna put bolts in here because it does hold the bracket on the inside. I think this is the last time. This has been on and off a couple times too, just doing the brake lines and locking everything up. And then I got me some new hardware. Got some grade 8s. And it's always good to use grade 8 nuts with grade 8 washers. Now we have the brake booster, master cylinder, all finally installed. All the brake lines to it. You see now that they're actually in the right spot instead of being, flopping over, how they look. Turned out really nice. So now we're gonna get our engine. We're gonna set our engine back in here. We don't have the tranny right now. That's a long story. We're gonna go over that next go around. So we're gonna put the engine in here without the transmission. We'll add the transmission later. It's a good thing we got all this room, huh? Why don't you tell the viewers at home why we don't have any room? It's because of this fine truck right here.
Hooray for lying!
Look at this, Blake. Look what we have for your fine automobile. I don't know if you can handle all this. Right here, we have our LS3, also known as a 2011 Cadillac, 6.2 liter, all aluminum, L92 cylinder head. That's what makes it an LS3. We have the factory LS3 intake. We have our hooker, exhaust manifolds / headers, 405 horsepower, pretty much a 550 lift camshaft in it. F-body drive, 92 millimeter cable operated throttle body. We have our SFI 4L80 flex plate. Of course, we got the AC Delco oil filter, polyurethane mounts, the ICT billet adapter plates, single roller timer chain. We have a Power Master alternator, 150 amp. Driver's mount's a lot of a booger. Now we can move forward. So now we can put, even though we don't have the tranny and the engine's not exactly in position, I can put the little spacer plate. Check this out. So this is a spacer plate on 65, 67s, I think maybe 8s too, but they have the spacer that goes in between the core support and the radiator. So I wanted to add auxiliary tranny cooler, so this is what I did. So I mounted it in between here. So we got our auxiliary tranny cooler, and then we have our stainless lines that come down, and then we go through it through a bulkhead, It's all -6. We'll have a little bit of a flex because of the engine rock. We have a urethane mount still, so the engine's gonna move. So we'll have probably like 6 inches or so of flex line, and then we'll go to hard line all the way to the tranny. What do you think of that bad boy? The radiator mounts here, so it has 2 on each side to do the radiator, but then on the core sport side, so it has 4 because 2 of these go through to the condenser and 2 go through to the core sport. So look at this. So see the condenser just sitting in here? So it has these brackets that come all the way through. So 2 of the bolts go to the core support, and then 2 go and hold the condenser in place. So I got a little spacer here. Got it powder coated. Turned out really nice, gloss black. So I'll put the ones in first that go to the core support so it holds the spacer. The condenser doesn't work, but we still want to keep everything as intact as possible. So when we're ready to fix the air conditioning, then it's all here. So they got little cutouts here so you can get in here with your socket. There we go. Ahead of the bolts here that hold the brackets, just missed the cross member. So everything is super happy. Condenser's held back in place again. All right, so now we got the radiator here. Got the good old Ron Davis. Then I made a little bit of adjustment to it. I lowered the radiator down just a little bit. It's the only thing I changed on this thing. But if that's the only problem you can find with the Ron Davis, it's not really a problem. So there we go. We got our radiator all installed. Don't even see the cooler. That's a Sano way to do it. It's super nice.
That's a what way to do it?
It's a Sano. Sano.
How do you spell that?
Sano. So you wonder why, probably, that we put the cooler, a training cooler in the front when the radiator comes with a training cooler in it. Well, the training cooler that we found out, in my opinion, is a little on the small side. After driving that 62 up to Reno and going up the grades, it got a little hot. But instead of taking the cooler out of it altogether, so what we're gonna do on this is we did the auxiliary cooler, and now we're gonna use this, it's gonna be a power steering cooler. So I'm gonna run a hard line from the return from the gearbox. It's gonna come in here, it's gonna come out here and go to the reservoir on the power steering. And now we're gonna have a power steering cooler incorporated into the radiator. So we're not taking that out of the equation altogether and just leaving it open. We're still using it. So that's why we did it that way. That's why we did the auxiliary cooler. We got a bigger training cooler now. And then we have a cooler for the power steering because normally it's a closed system and it gets really hot. You know, there's nowhere to cool it. Well, you're gonna have to come back. Gotta see how this thing's gonna be finished up. It's gonna be a nice cruiser. Good power. Like, share, subscribe, comment. Watch the next video.